Hello, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Ethics with Thibodeau and Kelley, in that order, apparently. I'm Greg Kelley, and I would like to introduce my co-host, Jason Thibodeau. Jason holds the PhD in philosophy and is a professor at Cypress College in Cypress, California. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's
Where
Jason.
else would it be? Yeah,
Indeed. Well, I mean, I don't teach at Perimeter, Georgia.
true, true,
So
true.
go ahead, introduce me.
So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Greg Kelley, who is professor of English at Perimeter College at Georgia State University.
Well said.
Did I
Yeah.
get that right? Yeah.
Perimeter College of Georgia State University. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know what the preposition is.
okay.
You know,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the political truth is that Georgia State University is a big research institution, but Perimeter College is a big access institution. And so I question a little bit the institutional relations, but our institutional presences are of secondary importance because we're here to talk about ethics, right?
Correct.
Okay,
That's what I'm here for.
that's what you paid for. Okay. Um, Now, you and I have been having conversations that are sometimes quite lengthy. And we've been having these conversations for, what did we figure, 13 years?
Uh, we met in 2011,
2011.
so
So
yeah,
13 years.
approximately 13 years.
Yeah, yeah. And so we've been having conversations, and as a professor of English, an American professor of English, uh, I want to make the distinction between conversation, which goes wherever it wants to go, and discussion, which has something like a subject. So we're gonna have the subject of ethics as the focus of our discussions over the ensuing weeks, months, and I hope years. Very soon after we met, like nearly the first time we met, we started talking about ethics, and you alerted me that I was interested in ethics without really knowing it, because I was interested in the social theory of Jürgen Habermas, as he writes about it in the theory of communicative action. And he talks about discourse oriented toward understanding, and that discourse oriented toward understanding refers to things, refers to real things, including the objective world and the subjective world and the social interpersonal world. And discourse oriented toward understanding, everything comes in threes, involves factuality and sincerity and ethics. And so I thought I was interested in social theory, but it turns out that I was really more interested in uh, uh, factuality, sincerity, and ethics. Now, sometime after we met, you informed me that you were interested in a book by Derek Parfit, and I think you hadn't read it yet, but you'd read about it. And it was a book about ethics, or maybe meta-ethics, called On What Matters. And you said that Parfit was interested in resituating ethics away from command or away from imperative. And parenthesis, Immanuel Kant was famous for the categorical imperative. We don't need to go there, but moving ethics away from, shall we say, compliance with command and toward value. That's what you told me like 12 years ago after we, early in our relationship. So, pick a question. What does Derek Parfit think value is? Or what do you, Jason, think value is?
Well, I guess I'm more qualified to answer the second than the first.
Than the late Derek Parfit.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, I'm more qualified to talk about what I think than what Derek Parfit thinks.
Yes.
But having said that, I would say that I think my answer is the same as his. At least it's the same as my understanding of his answer.
Yeah.
So
I was kind of hoping you would say that.
Yeah. Now, to some extent. So it might be worth at least mentioning a distinction here between kinds of value.
Oh dear. Okay.
I know.
All right. So before you tell me what value is, you're going to tell me that there are varieties.
There are varieties.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll try to make it brief. So I'll just talk about the terms we use to talk about these kinds of value. So there's one kind of value whereby we use terms like good and bad to talk about it. And there's a different kind of value where we use terms like right and wrong to talk about it, and obligatory, and permissible, those kinds of words.
Yeah.
Okay. So to give you the technical terms here, when we're talking about that which we use good and bad to talk about, that kind of value, that's called axiological value. And the other kind, where we use words like right and wrong, that's deontic value. Okay. So deon, as you know, comes from the Greek word for, or is the Greek word for duty. Does that sound right?
Translated as duty. And you're the philosophy expert. But once upon a time, we read the Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals by Immanuel Kant.
Indeed.
And I don't know whether Kant used the word duty. I think he did, whatever that German word is. And so that's just kind of by the way, that when we think of deontology, which is the idea that morality is deontic, morality is associated with duty, we tend to associate that with the name of Immanuel Kant.
Yes, and I don't want people to get confused between deontological approaches to ethics.
Yes.
Of which Kant is an exemplar.
Yeah.
And the idea of deontic value, because a utilitarian can accept that there is such thing as deontic value. They're just not taking a deontological approach to ethics.
That is an important distinction to make between deontic, but make it two adjectives instead of an adjective and a noun, right? That there's a difference between deontic, which has to do with duty in itself, would you say?
Yeah.
And deontological, which is a particular approach that employs certain, I won't say assumptions, but certain postures relative to duty.
Something like that, yeah. I think that's fine as far as, and I don't think we need to get into that.
Right.
I just wanted to make that clarification. Some people who are listening probably haven't heard those terms, and it's fine. You don't need to understand them, I think, for what we're talking about today.
If I may digress briefly, which is an area that I'm very strong in, we're addressing everybody. Now, some of everybody is people who are trained in philosophy. But that's a very small number. And honestly, Jason, they kind of have their minds made up for the most part.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
mean,
suppose.
theoretically, if you're going to be a philosopher, you're going to be open to new ideas. However, being trained in philosophy does not a philosopher make.
In
And
the sense
so,
of being open.
yeah. So we're just trying to share our thoughts on ethics with anybody who wants to listen. And so that means we need two things. Maybe we should have discussed this behind the scenes, but I think it's worth knowing that I would like everybody to know two things. The first is that we're going to try to use normal language as much as possible and stay away from jargon as much as possible. And here's a subtler thing. We want to try to give positive rather than negative definitions of things, have positive concepts of things. And I'm not talking about emotively positive. I mean, let's talk about what is instead of what is not. So,
Yeah.
one of only two varieties you've mercifully shared with us of value is deontic value. I sort of understand that. That's what we call right and wrong.
Yeah.
And so, okay. And the other kind is axiological. And that's what we talk about when we talk about good and bad.
Right.
Okay.
So the question you asked is, what is my understanding of value?
Yeah.
And so there's something I can say in general about both good and bad and right and wrong, and that is that ultimately, I think that we can give an account of these properties, goodness, badness, rightness, wrongness, in terms of reason.
In terms of reasons, plural.
Reasons, plural.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Got to make sure our sibilant band on the graphic equalizer is
Yes.
is well turned up. You got that, audio engineer? Oh, there's no audio.
Yeah.
And so it's I mean, just at the outset, I just want to emphasize that what you just said. So maybe you better just say it again. We can give an account.
Yeah, we can give an account of value of either of these kinds that we've talked about. That is ultimately given in terms of reason.
Reasons.
Reasons, yes. And so that's something that you and I need to talk about during this discussion, if not this time, then soon.
I mean,
in a future. Yeah.
It's basic to our
Yes.
understanding of ethics.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I'll start, I think, just by laying out what Parfit says about goodness. And it's probably fair to say it doesn't really matter, but just for the sake of fairness, this isn't particularly Parfit's idea. Other people have articulated what I'm about to say before Parfit and continue to do so. So the basic idea is that goodness is, and I'll probably have to repeat this, but goodness is the property that an object has in virtue of having features that give us reasons to have pro attitudes about those objects. That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Let's work through that backwards.
Okay.
Okay. So pro attitudes.
Hmm.
All right. Now, when I discuss this question about reasons and goodness, what is the relation of goodness to reasons? I very often refer to beverages because they're around us. Yeah. And so, oh, Maison Perrier.
Geez, yeah.
So, Southern,
Except I don't think it's a mineral water; it's just sparkling water. So.
okay. So, what is your attitude toward the beverage you just drank or had a
Well,
sip?
it's a so maybe I should talk about what my attitude was toward it before I held it in my hot little hand.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so I earlier today I went for a walk with my son
Uh-huh.
up a steep hillside nearby, and it's hot out, and I was actually wearing a weighted vest, and I got very thirsty because of that.
What, your hair shirt was in the laundry?
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a very good workout actually. But so I got home and I was thirsty, and I had some water, but even after having water, having a shower, I was still thirsty. So I thought I want one of those sparkling waters we have in the fridge. So that's
One
an
of those
attitude.
what waters?
Sparkling water.
Oh, sparkling water. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just went out to the store yesterday and bought these. So as I was thinking about my thirst, I thought, that would be tasty and it would quench my thirst.
Yes.
Right?
Now, I mean, ordinary water, still flat water, uh, in sufficient quantity would have quenched your thirst, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay. But the sparkle just gives it a little more pleasure.
Yeah. And it's also grapefruit flavored.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I love a fizz water too, but mine usually has the name of a grocery store on it.
Or LaCroix.
Or LaCroix.
Yeah. That's typically what I drink too, but I splurged yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. So what is your attitude? So before you held it in your hot little hand, did your attitude change when you started holding it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the important thing is that I had an attitude towards it, and that was a positive attitude. And in particular, we could say it was desire. I wanted it. I
Yeah.
wanted to drink it. I wanted to consume it. That is a paradigmatic pro attitude. It's a positive attitude about an object. Not the only one, but it is a good example of one.
That if you could possess it, you would.
Yes, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there are features about this object that establish this pro attitude or
That
suggested this
are,
pro attitude.
yeah, they stand as reasons in favor of the attitude.
Okay, so now we're getting there.
Mm.
So the features of the object give you reasons to hold a pro attitude toward it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great. So where does the wanting come in?
So wanting is a type of attitude, and I think it is probably useful to mention other kinds of attitudes. Now, there's also other kinds of wanting. In particular, I wanted to consume the beverage, but you can want to have something and not, you can want something and not want to consume it.
I
You
mean,
can want to
consumable that you want.
exactly. You can want to appreciate something.
That's a
You know,
word
you
we
can
have to talk about down the line.
yeah, Absolutely. But so suppose you hear about this wonderful waterfall nearby that you could hike to. You may want to appreciate the waterfall, right?
Yeah, so you were very indulgent when I said if you could possess it, you would, because that's one kind of want.
Mm-hmm.
And even it, right, you could possess it to consume it, or you could possess it to hold on to it. But you don't want to possess the waterfall. That's absurd.
Right. So, right. So you might want to appreciate something, be in its presence and appreciate it. There are other kinds of pro attitudes as well. Admiration is a pro attitude.
Somebody does something great, breaks the home run record without steroids.
Steroids, and you admire that. Yeah. So you can, hope is also a pro attitude. Hope. So hope is typically directed at future states, but not present states. But I guess for that matter, so is desire. At least desire is often directed at future states. But yeah, so hoping that something occurs, you know. So my daughter's trying out for the high school volleyball team this month. I hope that she makes the team. That's a pro attitude as well. So I hold that pro attitude of hope toward a future state of affairs, namely my daughter being on the high school volleyball. Did I say basketball? High school volleyball team.
You did say volleyball, so you're good.
Okay. All right.
No deduction.
Yeah. So these are some examples, different kinds of desire, admiration, hope. These are all pro attitudes.
Okay. And the features of the object, I mean, what is the relation of the features of the object to the pro attitude? In other words, does the object possess features that in themselves create this pro attitude? Or I mean, I don't know how pro attitudes happen, and I don't know how, or I'm pretending not to know how how features, to use your word, produce this pro attitude. Or I don't know if produce is the right word.
Right. So yeah, I don't think it is, as you know. So the point isn't that the features cause the attitude, though they may. I mean, we're not denying that there may be some causal story to tell whereby the features of the object produce or cause the attitude, but that's not the point. That's not a part of this account of goodness that I'm offering.
Hmm?
Rather, what's involved in that account is that the features are reasons for the attitude. And so this is where it becomes very important to understand what we're talking about when we talk about reason. So probably the most important thing, maybe the most important thing, is that reasons, in the sense I intend, are features that play a justifying role rather than an explanatory role.
Ah, okay. Reasons play a justifying role, not an explanatory role. Okay.
Now,
Yes.
sometimes, something can do both. To say that some feature plays a justifying role isn't to deny that it might also play an explanatory role. But that which makes it a reason is it's playing a justifying role.
Okay. So is this justifying role, can we express this justifying role in terms like stands in favor of?
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually, as you recall, so if you look at the first section of On What Matters,
Yes.
the book that you brought up,
Mm-hmm.
Parfit says that reason, we may not be able to define reason any other way than talking about that which counts in favor of.
Yes.
So reason is something that counts in favor of something else.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't really, that's not really a definition, because you're just substituting these terms one for the other. And if
Yes.
if you don't understand it, it's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So reason might be a basic concept that cannot be adequately articulated
In other words than itself.
in other words than itself. Exactly.
Yes. I'm kind of so and that phrase stands in favor of, I believe, comes from an earlier philosopher, a 19th century philosopher named Sidgwick.
I think he uses that. I'm not sure whether he came up with that, but I think that
I'm
he definitely.
sure that Parfit cites Sidgwick for that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that seems right.
And when we talk about words that are difficult or impossible to define, that you can't just find a formula for articulating it in different words. I think you said it well when you said that a reason may be a basic concept, and that you can't like analyze it any further than that. You can't break it down any further than that. And that's very similar to what a philosopher named George E. Moore said about the word good. So if we're going to talk about axiological value, we first discover that giving an account of that value in terms of reasons depends upon a basic concept that we can't simply give a dictionary definition for, namely reasons, but we're going to just have to say things that will help us and other people understand it. And that's very similar to what George Moore has to say about the word good, that it's just a basic concept and you can't really break it down any further in order to understand it. Whereas what's the opposite of basic?
Non-basic, or I mean, compound, complex.
Yeah, something like that, right? You can like etymologically, for example, break the word up and have an account of the parts of the word, and that'll help you understand what the word is. But here we have two words, namely reason and good, that we can't break them down any further than that. That doesn't mean, I really want to hasten to protest, that doesn't mean either that they don't mean anything, or that they mean whatever somebody wants them to mean. That's up to the personal individual, as Miss America puts it.
Right. So these words have meaning, and they have objective meaning. It's just that we can't convey their meaning in an informative way using words other than themselves, something like that.
Yeah.
And Parfit says something relevant in this connection. When he's talking about this point, he says that while you can't offer an informative definition of reason, you can enable someone to understand reason. You can get people to understand what the word means by getting them to have certain thoughts.
Yes.
Such as the thought that we always have a reason to avoid our own suffering, or something like that.
Well, yeah. So it turns out negative definitions or negative examples are instructive. They don't tell you what something is, but by understanding what it isn't, you can begin to turn toward what it is. Now, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay. I want to make explicit my anxiety about reasons, which I keep wanting to overemphasize that sibilant reasons against reason as a faculty of the mind. And, this is, we have discovered, I think separately in our discussions with other people, that it's hard to distinguish between reasons as factors that operate to justify that, and these are objective matters. These are not some subjective faculty. And something called reason, which had a big heyday in the age of reason, which was the late 17th and 18th and the entirety of the 18th century, and perhaps until 1789, although which was the year the French Revolution began. But French revolutionaries tried to build a temple to reason to oppose old religion. So we just have to accept that there's two different nouns. I mean, they're sort of homonyms. They're two words that look exactly and sound exactly the same, but they mean two completely different things. One is the noun reason, which you and I have been talking about, which are these factors that stand in favor of attitudes and indeed actions, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And then there's reason, which is some capacity of the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So listen to reason,
Mm-hmm.
or act according to reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, not at all. I don't even know if that makes sense. It might, but nothing about this account of goodness that we've been talking about depends upon a claim that there's a human faculty of reason. Nothing at all. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that another thing Derek Parfit says, I think it's the first line of the book, is we are the animals that can consider and respond to reasons.
Yes.
Right?
So sorry I interrupted you, but we got to get the quotation just right. Says the professor of English.
Yes.
We are the animals that can both understand and respond to reasons, plural.
Reasons, plural. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And what that claim means that humans have an ability, right? And that ability is the ability to respond and understand reason. Respond to and understand reason.
Yes. Yes.
That ability doesn't need a name, right? Maybe that's what people are talking about when they're talking about reason, isn't listening to your reason. I doubt it.
I doubt it. I think they're talking about some purely mental operation. And it's very clear from that first sentence of the book, which is a very rich sentence. I mean, we could, again, professor of English, but we could get a lot out of that sentence. That it doesn't matter how we're capable of doing this, but we are capable of both understanding reasons and responding to them. And I keep making this gesture. It's not that we make this gesture and say, oh, I'm going to understand reasons. No, it's that we perceive and know about facts in the world. And one way of thinking of these facts is as factors that give us reasons.
Right.
Or the factors that stand as reasons.
That count in favor of. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. We got to make that distinction between reason as a faculty and reason as a factor that stands in favor.
I mean, one
And I,
is a sort of subjective thing that we imagine takes place in the mind. Now, I know that understand is a factor that takes place in the mind, and I'm not going to try to define understand. Uh, but that word both is quite important
Mhm.
because we can both understand reasons. That is to say, we can witness either by directly perceiving or otherwise learning of certain facts. And equally importantly, or perhaps more importantly, right, we can take action or hold attitudes in response to those factors. Okay. So the old clock on the wall tells me that that would be a good place to wrap it up for today.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. That was great. I
Mhm.
mean, I know I was supposed to say that after I hit the close button, but this is our first attempt.
Yeah.
And so, Jason, I think it went swimmingly.
Yes, I agree. And it was also enjoyable, at least to me.
To me too. And
Good.
enjoyment is a very important factor in life.
Good.
All right. Thanks, folks. See you next time. Bye-bye.